Welcome. I'm Dawn with K-Square Technologies. This is our session on really being able to take advantage of the power of mail merge features in Microsoft Word. Think about how much time you could save if Word could help you create those repetitive emails, letters, and even labels. So when you have repetitive actions such as filling in contracts or sending out emails to customers, the mail merge features in Word might be the answer. Let's explore some of your options to really take advantage of this built-in feature in Microsoft Word. First of all, I'll introduce you to the mail merge wizard. That is, perhaps you've used mail merge for years or it's been a while. So the nice thing about the mail merge wizard is if you're brand new to it, it will walk you through and give you those steps. But once you're familiar with what's possible in mail merge, then you can also do a manual merge. And this gives you the chance to just have a little bit more flexibility to it, but they're both really easy. We'll also explore how to customize a mail merge, maybe to have specific fields within that, or even to set up rules to determine exactly who you want to send this mail merge to. That is, you may have a bigger list and you want to send it only to people for a specific state or for a specific code or other criteria and conditions that you set up. We'll also look then, of course, at mail merge for email and even creating mailing labels. So those are some of the things that we'll be exploring in our time together. But I'd like to just briefly cover the basic process, whether or not you're using mail merge or the wizard or manually building that. So we start off with a main document. And so in Word, this is going to either be a letter, it could be a label format, an envelope, email, or even something called a directory. So a directory is, unlike where each one of these is creating, let's say, a separate letter on individual pages, a directory is more of a continuous list of content that will be on the same page and will continue. So this is something that might be like a product or a customer list. But these things, you don't even have to have them all set up, especially for, let's say, labels. That's something that the wizard can walk you through. But we also need a data source. So the data source could be a Word table, could be an Excel worksheet. It could be a set of Outlook contacts, maybe that have been flagged with a particular category, for instance. And sometimes it's easier, though, to take those contacts and export them, let's say, to an Excel file. It could even be an Access database table. What we want to do is have it organized into columns and rows with distinct labels, that is, unique labels, so that we can identify those in the mail merge. And when we bring these all together, that gives us our merge results. So that's the basic combination that we have with that. Certainly let me know as you have questions. You can utilize the webinar Q&A feature, and then I can address those as it fits in with our time together. But one of the things I also want you to keep in mind is that there's a little bit of we can put a little bit of a flip here, because we're usually looking at it is many items, whether it's people or projects or something like that that you have that you want to move into one main document. But we also could approach it where there's a situation where you might have one item, one contact, for instance, and multiple documents that you want to populate. This can still save you a lot of time. So perhaps in a situation where you have a contract and there may be a master contract format, and you simply will be putting in different information as you want to populate that. Or it might be employee, whether it's onboarding documents or other things where you have a set of documents that need to be populated or filled out. And you could simply then perhaps do that one at a time as you have those situations. Now, you might have a situation where you have a number of employees that receive that, but if we just have a new hire, then we might have just one contact where we need to create multiple documents for that. So just want you to keep in mind then that flexibility as well. So those are the things that we'll continue exploring. Let me know how I can help you, and let's dive in and look at mail merge features in Microsoft Word. So I have this form letter, and we want to keep in mind that anymore these days, the letters might be printed out to a physical printer. It might even be to a PDF. But in this case, let's say that we want to print these out because we're sending some samples, for instance. And you can then actually have then the document all set up ready for the merge. Now, I've enabled in Word in the Home tab here, we have a feature that's a show hide. And I like to keep that turned on because it helps me to see exactly where we have hard returns and where we can work with this content. So I've created this letter, and I've kind of set some placeholders like name and address and greeting, and even a place where I want to fill in the city where these contacts are located. So this is the basic structure for it, and I'll use this in the mail merge wizard. So that's the basic idea where we have this document, and we'll go ahead and then launch this. Now, one of the things that we have then is in our ribbon tab, already built into Word, is our mailings tab, and that's where we'll be spending our time today. And what I want to do with this is I've got this document open, but I want to then prepare it for a mail merge. I'll start the mail merge here on the left-hand side, and you can see that we have the option. This is part of the manual mail merge. Right now, this is a normal Word document. And just as for those of you who've done mail merges before, if you have a document where you've set it up for a mail merge and you want to disconnect it from that source data, then this is how you can do it. You just simply make it into a normal document. So let's go ahead then and look at that, where we're going to move in, and we'll go through the step-by-step mail merge wizard first. This opens the panel over on the right-hand side. So first of all, what type of document are you working on? And you can see all those various examples here. So if it's an envelope or a label, those are the things where you would probably just start with a blank document, because actually a brand new document will be created for you with the layout and the formatting that you need for something like that. So in this case, it will be a letter. And at the bottom then, you see I'm in step 1 of 6. I'll choose next. And now we need to specify, where is this information coming from? Where is our starting document? And in this case, it happens to be our current document. You could start it from an existing document as well, which would make a copy for you. But here, I already have it open. So we don't need to open up anything or begin it from a template. My next step here is to select recipients, but you can see I could go backwards if I forgot a step or there was something that I missed, but I'll go ahead and select recipients. From here, I will use an existing list. So you could type a new list, although I'm going to discourage you from doing that, simply because I think it's a lot easier to build it first and really have that in place. And we won't be looking at working with Outlook contacts here. And as I mentioned, I find it easier to export those if that in fact is how you want to approach it, simply because you're able to make any edits that you need to, clean out anything that might not be needed. So we're going to use an existing list. And let me just show you what that list looks like, because it's an Excel file. And this could also be a Word table, but I have this Excel file, media contacts, with different columns for the information that I want. Now I've broken out the name and the address, for instance, into separate columns, and that is helpful if you might want to use those for sorting, for filtering, things along those lines. And this gives us more flexibility to have these be separate merge fields versus all in one. So that's one of the reasons, for instance, we have the address so that we could filter on a particular state, or we could sort the name by the last name, or we could sort it by the company. So that's the structure that we have here. Now I also have the email. If, for instance, this was going to be an email mail merge rather than creating these separate letters. So that's the document that we're going to be linking to. Let's come back to our form letter. I will browse and then navigate to the location. And that particular one then here is called Media Contacts. So I'll go ahead and open that up. You specify which sheet in that workbook. And it's also good to just flag this first row of data contains column headers. So if you have any extra rows at the top for titles, summaries, things like that, it's good to clear those out so that we just have a really straightforward merge with this. So now we have the content. It's showing us what it's finding there, and I'm just expanding this dialog box so we can see that. So each one of these columns we can make wider, as you're likely familiar with in Word tables and Excel worksheets. And then I can review this content. So from here, if I wanted to, then I would be able to sort, filter, and otherwise work with this recipient list. But a little bit about the data source. We already saw that in the example, but you want to have a unique name for each field so there isn't any conflict. So you don't want to have a name one and repeating that. You can have up to 40 characters in the field name. Now, one of the things that you want to make sure that you don't have any blank records. It's best not to use spaces in the field name. So we saw, for instance, that those had spaces. But if the fields or column headings have spaces like first name, last name, then what will happen is that Word will replace it with an underscore character. So if you don't make that fix, then Word will do that for you. So that's a couple other things to keep in mind. So although at this point, then I could sort and otherwise make changes to that. We'll go back to that in a little bit. But right now, we'll go ahead. And by the way, here is the name of the file, and I could edit it as well if I wanted to open it up directly. I'll go ahead and OK. And now from the wizard, it will show that this is what I'm linking to. And the next part is to write the letter. So now we're able to add various fields that we want to it. It could be an address block. It could be a greeting line. And we could add individual items as well. So keep in mind, this is for the wizard. So it's already giving you some presets. So let's go ahead here and look at this place here where we have the name and address. That's where I want to put in the address block. So go ahead and delete this because that was really just a placeholder. And we'll choose address block. That is, this is where Word is going to try to do the help for you. So what it's looking for are those fields that would make sense. So certainly by having them labeled, it's useful. But which fields it would put together to create that address block. Now, how did it figure this out? Well, in the bottom right hand here, we have match fields. And so what's happening is it's actually going out and kind of matching it up to its preset names and labels. And it's just simply, saying, well, what did I find there? So, that was set up to pretty well match this in terms of the names, but notice postal code, it's finding zip code. And there may be other fields as well that you use, but that might not, it might not pick up on. And so you don't have to have these all perfectly matched in terms of the names, but if you're seeing that things aren't laying out quite right, then this is the way, or this is the place where you can go ahead and kind of see if you can make some adjustments automatically. And keeping in mind, you could also do that through a manual merge if you find that the wizard is not working for you. The other thing that is helpful here is you can indicate exactly what you want to include. So if you didn't want the company name, you could take that out. And how formal do you want to be? Maybe you want it to be very informal and it's only the first name. Or you want to get more specific with this. And if you had salutations, which we don't have, or titles, then those things would be added as well. So we're just come back here to set this up just for a normal use of the full name. And we'll okay. So now it's putting in a code here for the address block. And we'll preview to see what that looks like. Now I'll put in a hard return here to separate that from the greeting. But that's one of the things we'll test this to see, did that work for us, or are there any other changes we need to make for that? So let's go ahead and do the greeting. Now I'll select it in this case, and I won't delete, but it will be replaced. And I'll go to the greeting line. What do you want this to be? And so with that, we could say to, we could have none, dear, and what type of punctuation do you want to follow there? Is it a comma? Is it a colon? Or once again, none? And if for some reason I don't have a name, then what would I like to use as an alternative? So that becomes another option as well. So for this one, I'd like to just use their first name. And with that, then I'll go ahead and pick then from the example, and we can see based upon that first entry for Anna Apple, it will then give us this example. Let's go ahead then and okay. And I said it was going to take it out, but it didn't. So I'm going to select everything except for that hard return. And there we go. So now we have the greeting line. I didn't have to have the punctuation there. If we were adding things manually, I would need to do that. So I've got the address block, the greeting line. And at this point, then I want to add some additional items. Now, at any point, if you wanted to preview, this option is available in the ribbon, and you'll find that that's probably going to be your easiest. But I could just preview here and then come back. So let's preview for a moment to see what do we have. And that looks good. So now I want to go back and write that letter because I'm missing one more thing, and that is the city. So I'll double click here, take this out and choose more items, because this is how we can then add particular fields that we want that might be part of the body of this mail merge document. And for this one, it's a city. So I'll go ahead and insert that, close, and add a space. So let's preview again. So now I have the address, the greeting, and the city. This also means then that if any of these need to be adjusted, we can once again go back to that write your letter. We can also preview here at the top to go through each one of those recipients to be able to see, well, how would I make changes to this? What do I want to modify? I could exclude a particular recipient. I could edit the recipient list at this point. So for instance, if I wanted to come in here and edit this, there might be someone I want to exclude. Now, to exclude, the other way to do that is with this checkbox. So that would be another way to be able to indicate that I want it to everyone except for this one person. Or while we're here, here's the option for sort. So I didn't sort it when I first brought it in, but maybe what I want to do is sort this by the last name. So I'll just simply pick sort records and pick last name. Now, if for some reason we had people with the same last name, I might then have it be then by first name or company, whatever criteria makes sense. So we'll go ahead and choose OK. Now, Anna Apple still stays at the top of the list, but it has resorted this list to match. So we'll go ahead and OK. And we could then continue previewing how these look and review our results. So once we have that, now we're ready to complete the merge. And that's getting us to our last step in the wizard. So for that, then the idea is, do we want to just send it directly to the printer? My preference is that we choose the edit individual letter. So even if we're not making any changes to it, it gives us a chance to review them, to see it in a separate document, to be able to preview that. And I'll also just mention here, a common mistake that can happen is skipping this last part. That is, okay, we can look at it and say, oh, well, I've got this right here, and that then we print out each page individually, one at a time. We just print it, we go to the next one, print it, go to the next one. And that is time consuming and not necessary. So make sure that you complete the merge, but instead of just sending it to the printer, choose edit individual letters. Because what will happen, and then here we go, this is going to merge. Which records do you want? Well, we saw how we could exclude them. We're going to include all of them. And we'll go ahead here and choose OK. So now we've created a brand new document. So that's good to keep in mind here. It's called Letters 1. We would typically save that, especially because we might be making changes to this. And let me turn off that show hide for just a moment. And we can see here. So if we look at the bottom of the page or bottom of the screen, I have 9 pages. So each one of those is a separate letter. So here's my next one. Control page down. Here's my next one. That's a way for us to navigate from one letter to the other. Control page up takes me back. But this is a brand new document that I could then save. And that also means that maybe I just have a note that I want to add just for George, and I'm just going to type it into the letter. It might not make sense otherwise for anyone else. But I'm able to control exactly and confirm what they look like, and then I can send them to print, whether it's to a PDF, to a physical printer, but I'm ready to go in terms of working with that. So that is the idea then here, that this is not linked back to the original data. This is a result of creating these as individual documents. So that's the idea with that. Now, if I switch back, then what we have then is that form letter that we were working with, and we are done with that wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and close this panel. One of the things that can be helpful, though, to keep in mind too, is that we have merge fields in this. Right now, we're looking at preview results. That's the result of that wizard. So if I could turn that off, here we go. And at the top in our ribbon, we could then go to the very first one, go to the next one, but it won't really be helpful for us unless I preview the results. Yeah. And then I can see the content. So this is another way to preview it. One of the other things that can be helpful here is highlight merge fields. So whether you have it as created as a result of the wizard or manual, Word doesn't distinguish exactly how you got to this point. So that doesn't matter so much, but just the idea here that you can now see exactly where I have merge fields. So if you're already looking at an existing merge, this can sometimes help as well. So that's the idea with that. And we will be working with some of the other field or options here in this mailings ribbon tab. So that was our wizard. Now let's go ahead and see how we can create then a manual mail merge with this. I'll keep this document open and just save it because we're going to come back and make a few adjustments to it a little bit later. When you're already comfortable with the options, this is where you can then go to the mailings tab and just start the mail merge. So I'll switch over to an email format. And it's good to keep in mind in the email format that you should include all of the content, any graphics you want, and even your signature, because these are going to be sent via your email. Let's say it's Microsoft Outlook, with the formatting, the links, all the content that you have in this email format. It won't be sent as an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, for instance. It will be as an email. But one of the reasons why this is often a much better option than, let's say, one email with a blind carbon copy, a BCC, is, first of all, we can customize the greeting. We also can add custom fields and messages per email. So we're able to distinguish and personalize those. And the other thing that can help us is that very often, if an email goes out to a BCC, then it will go into junk or spam. But we can often bypass that because the mail merge process for emails is sending out individual email messages. And so there can be a limit where at some point, and the numbers shift a little bit, where it starts to get over 100 or a couple hundred, then it starts to look more suspiciously like spam, where you have too much at one time. But there can be multiple reasons why you might find this to be a much better approach than just simply creating one email that you send out to a bunch of people. And we also have the issues where we need to make sure that, these are people that have given you permission, or that it's okay for you to send them information via email. But let's go ahead then and look at how we can walk through, whether it's a letter or an email, how we can do this manually. So it's very much with this, I'm going to go back to mailings and I'll start the mail merge as an email message. So rather than the wizard, we'll go ahead and choose this as an email message. So this gives me the idea of seeing more about what it will look like as an email versus a letter. So that's the first part with that. Next, what we're going to do with this is choose the recipients. So once again, I'll use that media contacts list. And we'll bring that in. Now, it's also good to know that, for instance, if you save the letter or you save the email format, that it is going to retain the link back to that original source. So if that recipient list is changed or renamed, then one of the things you may have to do is to relink it, because it's going to keep looking for it every single time you open up this file. So that's one of the pieces that you have with it. Next, what we'll do here is we're just going to put in one field, and that will just be part of the greeting here. And with that, then I'll choose insert merge field. Now, I'll just pick here the first name. I could choose the greeting line, but because I don't need to have anything too formal, I'm just going to pick the first name. And I've added the punctuation, or have the punctuation for that. So let's take a moment to preview the results. So now we're seeing what it will look like to the recipient. I can move through these, make sure that that looks good. And that's what I have with this. So I may not need to add anything more to that. It just might be to customize it and have it be a little bit more personalized with it as well. So that's the idea there, where we can do this manually. Now, when we're ready, now keep in mind, I could still insert other merge fields. Once again, notice that they have the underscore to separate anytime there's a space. But once I've previewed this, now I could be ready to merge this. So although I won't actually send this one out, I want you to see what this looks like. We'll go finish and merge. And I could, once again, edit individual documents. But remember, we're sending these as email messages. So this is what the screen will look like, what the dialog box will look like. You're going to add a subject line that they will all have. Okay. What's the format I want to have? And then you could have a particular range of records you want to send out. And by the way, here it's picking up by default, the field is email, but if you had a different name for it or otherwise, just confirm that it's finding the correct field for that. So if we said okay at this point, then this is creating individual emails to each one of those contacts, and you will actually see it in your sent folder. So it's connecting to, I'll use Outlook as the example for that, but whatever your default email is, it will go ahead and use that. So in this case, then, this is just another way for us to create a mail merge. And hopefully that is giving you some inspiration and ideas. So the preview is a way for us to really just make sure that we have put together the content in a way that it's readable and that we're sending it to the right people and that we can organize it in any way we want to. Now, I mentioned that instead of creating one document for multiple people or items, you might have projects where you want to create multiple documents for one mail merge entries. So for an employee onboarding process, for contracts or legal documents. So I just want to show you a quick example of what this might look like. First of all, and it could be a Word side of it too, but it just so happens I have this in Excel. So I have this Excel file, contract merge data, and these are all the things I might want to populate, let's say, into a contract. And keeping in mind that this could be a contract that could have many, many pages to it. So the advantage of setting it up as a mail merge is I can make sure that if something's repetitive, it might be like the contractor name, that might be in multiple places. I don't have to keep typing it over and over and over again. And so that is one of the pieces that we have there. So let's come back to this, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here we have the Word document, the contract. Now, in this case, it's a very short document, but it could be many pages. And this has already been set up to link to that. Now, if I wasn't sure, if I wanted to see what that was, I could then come in and say, edit the recipient list. And it would show me exactly what that looks like. It would show me what that's called. And if I hover over it, I can even see where it's located. So I have all that information. But the nice thing about this, and this is purposely highlighted so you can see that, is that now I could have other documents that are linking back to that same source data, and then create the package of documents that would be for this particular instance, employee, contract, agreement, whatever it might be. So the highlights there are just for emphasis here. But the idea, hopefully you can get kind of the sense here, is that now I can be a big time saver, because if I had this content that is then showing up in multiple places, like the bid number or the name of the company, all of these things, are coming in, and I don't have to keep putting in the amount, etc. So that's the real advantage. You can see where it continues to populate it, even though we might have many, many different places where we want to use it, whether it's multiple places in one document or multiple documents for that one instance. So that is another way for you to work with it. Now, the other thing that can be helpful to this, let's look at that employee situation. You can have a master file where you put in the employee information, but then it's going to change. But you have rather than having separate files for each one of them, you just have that master file where you fill that in. And then you have these master documents that will link to that. So if the data changes, then it will automatically fill it in for you. So hopefully that's giving you some inspiration and something that, perhaps you haven't thought of as another way for us to work with the merge. And one of the things I did want to kind of call your attention to here, and this is something that it is not really easy to track down here, and that is when we're linking to, let's say, Excel data. Here in the Excel side of it, it is formatted to show this as currency. So if I went back to my Excel data, here it's formatted as 56,000. But now I go to my contact, my agreement, my notice, and it's not. So what do? Well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and select this field, and I'll press Alt and the F9 function key. Now let's get that to work better for us. Oh, it's going to be stubborn here. There we go. Alt F9. Sometimes a little touchy there, and what this is doing is it's going to reveal the field code. So this is what's behind the scenes. Thank goodness we don't have to look at this most of the time. But here, what we want to do is customize this. Now, there's a lot of different ways this can be customized. It's something that you can do more search for, but basically you're looking for how to customize the merge field in a Word for Excel data. That is, I want to be able to add this. So here I'm going to click in this after amount, and I'm going to type in here slash and $, and there's specific format $0.00. So I'm actually telling it that this is how I want it to be formatted. And there are other examples for rounded whole numbers, or if you don't want to have decimal places, then you wouldn't include those, for instance. But that's the idea for how we have to apply that formatting. So otherwise you can spend an awful lot of time thinking like, well, it's correct in Excel, how come it's not here? And I'll just move down here so you can see that there we go. Notice how that had already been fixed in the example further down in this document. So that was put in manually. That isn't something that will happen automatically. So now we'll do Alt F9 again. And I have to kind of press, now this should refresh. I'll highlight this. There we go. I had to hit the F9 function key. What that does is it refreshes the fields. So the Alt F9, I have to kind of press them at the same time because the Alt key otherwise will move up into the ribbon tab. That's another way for us to access that. But definitely wanted to just make you aware of the fact that we can customize that merge field, and there may be situations where it doesn't quite work out the way that we expect it to. Let's look at some other options. So what we've got coming up is I'll show you how to customize the mail merge and the letter. And I'll show you as well how we can do labels, for instance, in working with that. And that might be really helpful for us. It's that time of year when, if you haven't already done so, you may want to create those holiday cards and get those labels done. So I'm going to switch back over to our letter that we started with earlier. And I want to set up a situation where I have various rules. Now, first of all, the rules mean that I can determine who is going to receive various versions of a letter, or maybe I only want to control that only certain people do. So let's look at one other piece before we look at rules. And that is, I'm going to edit the recipient list here. And if we choose filter, that means that I could come in and say, just like we did with sort, that we could do some comparisons here for which content, or it might be a state, maybe it's a particular company, that will filter for you. Another way that we could do that is if we look at the drop down here. So something you're likely familiar with in Excel, for instance. So for this, I could say, I only want to see the people that are, let's say, in Colorado, and only those people would show up in the letter. That might be one way to work with it. In this case, so that creates a filter, but in this case, I'll choose all. I want to see them all. So that is a simple way for us to control which contacts we want to send it to. And as we saw earlier, or we could just exclude particular ones. But if you had hundreds, then you need to have more specific filters for that. So that becomes one part of it. But the adding rules, that's a little bit different. And what we want to do with this is that I want to, if the people are in Colorado, I want the letter to be customized in one way. However, if they're not in Colorado, I want to have different content for that. So that's basically how we're going to work with that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop down into the place where I want to add this. And we'll go then into rule. And you can see there's multiple ones. I'm going to do an if, then, else. So the idea here is if, and for this one, I want it to be the state is equal to Colorado, that I want to insert this. So I went to where I wanted that field to go, that instruction. And I'm going to move to another, just to make this a little faster for us as well. She says, well, I'm going to come out of this then, because it's being a little bit, okay. So here I have some content. I will just copy all of that with Control C, and let's go back to our form letter. Okay, let's try this again. And we'll go into our rules, if, then, else. State is equal to Colorado. I'll insert this text. I don't need all of that, so I'll select what I don't want and delete that just so that we have that. So this is what I wanted to insert if they're in Colorado. Otherwise, if they're not, then this is what I want it to say. So hopefully that makes sense. But the idea is you're able to actually control the content, not just the fields, but the content based upon whatever criteria you have. So the people from Colorado look at the top part, and the people that are in different states will have the bottom. So let's go ahead and okay. So for this one, notice that she's not in Colorado. And with that, then I'll make it a little bit smaller. And notice what happens then. as we move to the next record. So here's someone from Colorado, and here the content is changed. I've also sent you a complimentary pass, and as we move through those, you can see how that will fluctuate depending upon, once again, where someone is located. So that is then another way for us to customize a mail merge with the if, then, else. And as we saw before, then we would have, once we have that in place and we've previewed the results, we have the option to finish and merge, and then we can decide what we want to do. As I recommended, choose edit individual documents. That way we can preview it. Otherwise, if we print, it just goes straight to the printer, which might be absolutely fine as well. The nice thing about the print individual documents is if you are physically printing and you need to print just one particular letter, it's a lot easier to go back to that one rather than to, it's possible because it's a separate document for us to be able to do that. And as we saw before, I could go to edit recipient list and choose sort. We already had that idea of last name, first name. So we've got multiple things in place that will determine how we're going to view it and what content they receive as well. Hopefully that's inspired you to see that there's a lot of possibilities in working with mail merge in Word. So let's look at the idea of creating mailing labels. With mailing labels, then here again, it's easier, with a letter, we just started with a regular letter, but I'm going to start here with a blank document. And the mailing labels will actually create a brand new document for us, but this is just, we're just starting here, and we'll go to mailings. You could go through the wizard if that is something that you're more comfortable with. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and start the mail merge, choose labels. And the first thing, of course, who makes them? Most commonly, it's going to be Avery, but you might have other manufacturers here. So I'll pick Avery here. And I'm looking then for a particular simple mailing label, 5160. So I'll move through this to find that particular one, but you may have different purposes, different label size. Okay, so this is my format. I can see the dimensions for this. I can even go into the details of the label if I wanted to change something about that, but we're good with this. So basically just picking my labels, what is it I want, and I'll go ahead and choose OK. So now I have that label format and I can start building my content. So a couple things that's good to keep in mind here is if you are adding individual merge labels, then or fields, then you may need to change the spacing for this content. But let's go ahead here. I'm going to select the recipients. I'll use an existing list, which happens to be a Word table. And so this is already set up. Notice how with the labels, then it's Word has created this next record. So that is a code it puts in automatically to make sure that it goes to the next record in that list. And this is what the list looks like, by the way. So this is our content. Come back to my label. Okay. And now let's add this. So a couple different options. Probably easiest is to do the address block, but you would have the flexibility to add the fields individually as well. If for some reason you had room on your labels, for a graphic or something like that, you just put it in the first one, and as you'll see, then we can update the labels. So for this one, I'll go ahead and add an address block. I do have titles here, so we can see how formal we might want, and I'll go ahead and OK for that. So I've added the address block, and I'll go ahead then and update labels, because if we just preview it now, I'm only going to see this first one, and we can see that's some things we need to fix here. Okay, so the address block might not be the best way to work with it, or what we might have to do here, I'll select this whole thing because this is actually a word table. And the problem I had with that is that we're getting a lot of spacing here. We want this to probably be single spaced, but because the default is not single spaced in Word, let's see how we can fix that. So I'll select the entire table, go to Home, and I'm going to choose my spacing here. So first of all, I want to have that be 1.0, and I'll look at line spacing options and remove. I don't want any spacing before. I'll make that 0, or spacing after. And if I need to, I could change that to single. So what we want to do is make sure that we're removing those gaps with that. Now, we also, this is another tip that can come up with labels, is in my layout here, I might want to set up these cells so they're not at the very top. Instead, I might want to have them centered, vertically aligned. So just so that it fits on the label a little bit nicer instead of sitting at the very top. Let's see if we've fixed that up so that it works for us. Well, that looks a lot better. Now, how do I talk to the other ones? And by the way, I could take out this hard return. Why do I do that? Because it makes it a little bit more centered. And that's why I like to have that show hide feature enabled. So we're not done yet, though. What we need to do is update the labels, because now that will throw that address block into all of the other ones. That's the magic, and that's one of the things you need to know when you're doing the labels. So now we can look at this and see, okay, this looks good. We've got this content in here, everything's matching. And this is the other thing to confirm. We might have to change our font size. There might be something that needs to happen when we have taller or more content for the labels. But at this point, then we would be ready to print them out. So that is the idea then of being able to really, once again, leverage our mail merge to be able to work with that. Hopefully that's addressed some different questions for you and some things that aren't necessarily intuitive, especially when you're doing mail merge, for instance, for labels, is the importance of some of the formatting for that. Where is that coming from? To be able to update the labels, and certainly taking advantage of previewing those results. And for this, I could save this. I don't need to do anything more, but if I wanted to, let's say if I want to use this layout for something else in the future, then I might want to send it out to an individual document to be able to save it. Otherwise, I will save this for my mailing labels. So that's the idea that we have is there as well. So hopefully that's inspired you in terms of what's possible. Let's look at one other quick example. I just want to grab something for that, and we will go ahead and move forward. All right. So I mentioned before, and just want to show you a quick example of that, the idea of doing a directory. You know, this is, go ahead and link this to, that's the prompt that we would see if it's not sure where it's supposed to go. Okay. So here we have a directory. Now just know that for this one, I have a header that I've put in to match kind of the layout that I want for it. A directory is something that you can set up either through the wizard or manually. But the difference is it's kind of like the labels where the content flows from one to another. It's not going to be really obvious here yet as we start working with it. This is linked to our context list. And we saw earlier how we could edit this so that the amount would come up and show correctly. I have a couple hard returns to separate this, but we could preview and go through here to see that everything's kind of matching up for us. But what I want to do here too is I'm going to edit the recipient list because I want to do a filter. So if this is donations that are $100 or more, then I might want to make sure that my filter is showing that. And in this case, I already had that set up, but you can see that now I could also clear that. This is what I would do with that. Just have the amount greater than or equal to 100. And the filter will do that for me. So how do I see the directory? Well, this is where I'm going to finish and merge to individual documents. I'll do all the records. And now this is the result of my directory. That is, this is what I'm getting is where it's a continuous list all on one page, going to the next page as necessary in working with that. And the descriptive information I put in the header because then that is going to be repetitive on each page. That's just a very quick look at the idea of a directory as well. I hope that you've had lots of takeaways in terms of how you can really leverage what's possible in working with the mail merge features in Word. This session is part of K-Score Technologies learning options. That is, we are offering these K-Score Technologies webinars once a month on the second Tuesday of each month. So upcoming, we are almost into 2023. Put on your calendar and plan to attend our upcoming sessions where we will be looking at how we can manage tasks with Microsoft 365 applications, so using Outlook, To-Do, and Planner. And then we'll start exploring different productivity tips to make the most out of working with Microsoft Outlook. We have additional offerings on our schedule, so look for those emails from us and plan to join us, please, for this training series. So that's our look at time-saving ways to work with those mail merge features in Word. How can we help you to be more productive? Please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to support you with your Microsoft technologies. Thanks for joining us today.